This is Dan Schneider. On this Dan Schneider video interview, doing something a little bit different. Not talking about philosophy, not talking about pop culture, not talking about anything necessarily that would be expected to be on such a show. But I'm speaking with an author, Isaac Marin, and actually not going to be talking about his work, but talking about a video he made that was very personal to him, to me, and probably to a lot of people. Isaac Marin is my guest, and we will be talking about pets, love, and loss. A couple of weeks ago, I was doing my usual writing, going through my notes and whatnot, and had my YouTube thing on the playlist, just going video by video, whatever came up, just listening to it in the background. And a video that Isaac made about a cat that he once owned that had run away some years before, had been found, and he went on about his search for the cat, his feelings of loss, and eventually the cat came back into his life somewhat, and I'll let him talk a little bit about that as we go on. But before we do, Isaac, as I mentioned, is a writer. Let me just ask a little bit about you, Isaac. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and were you an artistic type growing up? Were you a cat lover, dog lover growing up, etc.?
Yeah, all of those. I kind of did all the types of arts all at once in my youth and just kind of shuffled between them and tried to figure out which ones were going to work for me. And started writing fiction when I was about 14, and I wrote a bunch of stuff over the years until my mid-20s when my first book got picked up, More Bodies, and that was kind of the start of my professional career. And then just been trying to keep it going since then.
So from what I could tell from just briefly researching, and generally I don't like to necessarily look into the backgrounds of people. I like to deal with the matter at hand. So you wrote a series of, I guess these are sort of new wave kind of zombie books, or what
Yeah.
was that? And do you define yourself as a genre writer? Because you also published a poem book. Do you consider yourself more of a genre writer that's just branching out, or what?
I never really had much interest in defining it that way. Like most of the stuff that I've written has some kind of weird element to it, but it's never been. Been no recurring theme as far as, is it science fiction, is it horror, is it whatever. I I think of those categories more as like a sales and marketing tool than an artistic tool. For me, it's just whatever idea comes into my head that I find interesting, I'll write about it. And sometimes it's happens to fall neatly into a genre label like that one. That one actually, Warm Bodies, threw the marketing people for a loop because they were like, well, there's zombies, but it's not really horror. It's sort of, there's a relationship. Is it a romance novel, but it's about zombies? Is it a comedy? And like every bookstore had it on a different shelf. So I just kind of decided to stay out of it and just write what I wanted to write. So my most recent novel is pretty much just realism. So who knows what people will do with that one.
So you're probably too young. You're probably born around 1980, if I'm looking, well, 80, 81. You're probably
Yeah.
too young to remember a television show called Grizzly Adams. When I was a teenager, it was on.
No,
Uh,
I know Grizzly
oh,
Adams.
you do? The man who he was accused of a crime and ran off into the wilderness and was befriended by bears and Native Americans
Yeah.
and all that stuff. So you have done something similar. I don't know if you've been befriended by Native Americans or have a grizzly bear, but you have a cat named Bob. What prompted this? Because in looking at it, it looks like you got disgusted or something with life in general. Is it the political situation in this country? Is it the economic situation? Is it? I mean, what?
It was a lot of factors converging to that decision. I had been kind of progressively moving further and further out of civilization for a few years. I lived in Seattle for a long time, and then I kind of got sick of the city life, and just that decision, that shift was basically just realizing that I was paying for a lot of stuff I didn't want anymore. Like just the cost of living in a city buys you certain amenities like access to, cultural events and bars and restaurants and complex, dense social life and all that kind of stuff. And I just realized I'm not really doing any of that. So why am I even here? So I moved out to a Washington coast island called Orcas Island that was pretty remote, but still kind of within earshot of the city. So if I wanted to be a part of that, it was, a half a day's drive and not that big of a deal. But I was out there kind of trying to hang on to that life a little bit still while enjoying nature, but just kind of still kind of having a foot in the door, trying to be participating in society and kind of being part of that like progressive culture and everything. And yeah, after a few years of that, I realized like even that's too much. I want to get away from everything. And still, like case in point, here I am connecting again, but it's from a comfortable distance now.
Yeah.
So I can kind of live my own life out in extreme isolation, and then when I need it, I vacation back into the world.
So I'm assuming, and I'm not trying to pry, but I'm assuming you don't have like an ex-wife and children, so you're it's just
No,
you.
no tragic backstory other than my dad died. That was part of the push. Actually, is just kind of broke me for a couple of years, and I'm like, I gotta go lie down in the dust for a while. Just
Hmm.
wait till I recover.
So from the looks of the landscapes on both, well, in looking you up and also on your website, it looks like you're in the Scablands. Is that correct?
Scablands. I've never heard that term.
Oh, in
I've called it the
Washington,
wasteland here and there, but
well, it's there used to be a big glacial lake that when the ice age first got going, the dam broke, the ice dam broke, and presumably, I don't know how many billions of tons of water rushed down to the Pacific Ocean, and the much of our Oregon and Washington are covered by the Scablands. I'm surprised. Uh,
yeah, that might be what this area is called geologically,
uh-huh.
because it's the Okanagan Valley, which is a big glacial runoff like that. Um, Everything out here is you can definitely see the evidence of glaciers. There are these deep valleys and then just wide open fields that have nothing in them except random piles of giant boulders, and it's like, how did that get there?
And just for the edification, just for people who are geographically inclined, in the state of Washington, um, are you near like Yakima or Spokane? Because my dad served in the Civilian Conservation Corps back in the 1930s, and he was a logger and did all that stuff during the Great Depression, and so he had very fond memories. Are you out in that area?
Yeah. I'm kind of almost dead middle of the state.
Okay.
Yakima is, I think, 3 hours away from me, and Spokane is almost exactly the same. So Seattle is about 4 hours.
Okay.
It's just a little bit closer to Spokane, but I'm kind of in the middle of everything, but
Okay.
far away from everything at the same time.
So let's turn to the reason for my contacting you. And we'll talk about the videos you made and reactions and getting the typical kind of incel trolling from some people that you mentioned in your second video about it. But so if I can just summarize, let me just do like a little précis here, and then you can fill in the details. You adopted this cat that you called Watson, and it looked orangey. Was he an orange? Is he an orange cat?
He was gray,
Gray. Okay.
kind of gray tabby.
A gray tabby, and you adopted him, had him for 6 years or so, and then in one of your moves to, I guess maybe it was to the island by then, you had left him in the care of your grandparents. Through some circumstance, he got out. You didn't know what happened to him, and after a number of time putting the flyers around, doing all that stuff, and I'll mention briefly later my own experience in that. You came to the conclusion that more than likely he was not coming back. He may have been killed. Whatever it might have been. You get years later, you get a call from a vet, with the chip in the ear or I guess it's in the scruff for cats, that your cat has been found. It turns out he's been living with an old lady under the name of Sebastian, and you are reunited, and you make a very generous, I would say, play there to let the lady who's been caring for him for a number of years keep him. Fill in the details what I've missed or misrepresented.
No, that's all pretty accurate. I like how you characterized it as him living under the name of Sebastian, like he's on the run from the law, assumed a new identity.
Yeah.
Maybe that was the case. I don't know. Maybe he was trying to get away from me. But no, that pretty much is the size of it. I guess where the drama started really was after I got that call from the vet, because then it was this very strange situation where the vet, like, I guess technically they don't even have to tell me who brought him in. They had to ask permission from this lady to give me her number. I don't know what would have happened if she had said no. I don't know if they would have still called me and I would have had to like track her down somehow. It would have been an interesting saga.
Well,
But
wouldn't I mean, pets are considered property. You know, I mean, where animals, you know, aren't endowed with the rights that we are by our society. So would you have had the legal right if you'd said, listen, you have my cat in your care, I want my cat back, I don't care who brought him in?
yeah, I would think so. I guess if she had refused to give me her number, then the vet I probably would have had to take it to legal space. I'm not sure what would have happened there. I think technically it is property. So yeah, I would, since, you know, my name's on the chip, that makes him my cat. But yeah, she did give the number, and it's a very strange phone call. It just, because I think when I called her, she probably assumed that I would be coming to take him, and she was kind of in tears already when I got her on the phone, and had kind of this defensive posture. And my goal was kind of just to figure out like what had happened, what her role in it was, how long she'd had him, and I didn't know what was going on. Like, she might have just found him that week for all I knew.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I wanted to hear the story, so I talked to her about it, and she had found him about 9 months after I lost him. So he was, who knows where for this. There's this gap in the history where he was he ended up in a whole different town. So somebody must have picked him up, unless he wandered very far afield. It was a town maybe 10-minute drive away. So possible that he walked there on his own.
Well, you know, there are stories of like the old movie Benji, of dogs and cats, 1,200 miles. They get some. They have some almost, well, I guess you'd call it preternatural almost ability to hone in on their family somehow.
Yeah, usually it's dogs that I've heard that.
Yeah.
I assume it's probably happened with cats too, but I can't think of stories with its cats. Usually cats kind of establish their territory and they just like to set up there.
Yeah.
But yeah, she found him in another town 9 months later, and he was in pretty bad shape, and basically just like, she thought he was a stray cat. He was all beat up and skinny, and just kind of did the typical thing where she, you know, lured him in with food, and gradually he comes around more and more, and he didn't have a collar at that point either, so there was nothing indicating who she should contact or anything. From my point of view, I mean, in the modern era, most modern pet owners know about chips. They know that, you know, if you take him to the vet, you scan it, you find out who owns it. But I don't know. She's old enough that I could buy that excuse if I want to. And she mentioned that, you know, he was just in such bad shape. She didn't really think about trying to reunite him with the owner, because she thought, you know, whoever had this cat wasn't treating him well anyway. So I can understand that perspective too.
Let me just ask before you go on. So she never, in the intervening 6 years, he was never sick enough to bring to the vet, I'm assuming.
Apparently.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of strange, because when I owned him, he got in fights pretty frequently with neighborhood cats, and
he was an indoor cat when you had him? Okay.
Yeah, he was at the time, though that's not how he got lost. Funny enough, all those years of kind of living a risky life, he was fine. And then once I tried to put him indoors, that's when he disappeared. So,
and
he was.
I think someone on the comments to one of the videos I saw said this was his way of rebelling against your being sort of a fascist dictator or something. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, I had to stop reading the comments quite a while ago, because it just became just like daily abuse, just to skim through all the strong opinions that appear in comment sections. So I don't know what's going on in the dialogue these days, but there's still, you know, dozens of comments a day, if not hundreds.
So so when did you and how and why did you make the decision to go see him. You have what they would have called quit claimed Watson, aka Sebastian. You've given up, at least for the moment. In your last video that I saw, you may have come to an understanding that if the old lady passes away, you get it, and not her, her rowdy grandson who's a boozer and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the decision to go see him, I mean, I told her on the phone after she kind of explained the whole situation to me, and I, took a moment to shed a few tears and just decide, like, yeah, I'm not going to take him away, because the situation it didn't seem right. I mean, it's just been too long. If it had been 3 years, probably would have been a different story, maybe even 5 years, but it's just so long and so much happens, and it's at the point where I just feel like for a cat, that's a lifetime, that he has got a whole new perception of the world now. And then for me to just, go snatch him, take him out to live in this tiny little shed with another stranger cat who you'd probably hate. And it just seemed like selfish, I guess. Like I wanted to. But.
Yeah. Plus, humans. It's been shown that especially older people do better physically with a dog or a cat by their side. I've even heard that cat purring has ameliorative effects for especially the aged. And so you're probably thinking, well, I don't want to take him, and then she dies 3 days later from grief, too.
Right. It was probably more so for her sake than for his, but maybe 50-50. It's just like I couldn't, having experienced what that felt like, to lose that very same cat. I'm like, I'm going to turn around and make someone else experience the exact same thing, because she had him for just as long as I did. It was almost even split. So it's like, whose cat is he at this point? It's hard to say.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think I sent in, when I sent the email, I don't think I would have done the same thing, but I'll get to that in a bit. So so let's talk about when you had the Watson. What is the difference? Let's just say, what is the difference between the young Watson and the middle-aged Sebastian? Well, was there a continuity that you saw? Was there still the same? There's the saying, or there's the belief, or actually, I guess it's scientifically proven that every 7 years, every atom in one's body is replaced. The river of self, and after every 7 years, you're literally physically made up. Your beings, human beings, or cats, or whatnot, living things are not just things; they're patterns. And was there continuity that you could see between young Watson and middle-aged Sebastian?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get to spend a lot of time with him, and it was a strange introduction, just because he was always kind of skittish when I owned him.
Yeah.
He was comfortable with me, but if a stranger would come over, he would always run and hide under the bed for a while till he got comfortable again. So she said that he's very much like that with people in her house, and she was wasn't sure if he would even come out and look at me, but I think that physically he was definitely, he was definitely, you could see the age. He was a little bit kind of slower moving, and little hints of white in his fur, and just kind of looked like an old man, and
that's Bob behind you. Hello, Bob.
Oh yeah, there he is. Yeah, here's the new generation coming in to stake his claim. Yeah, as far as his personality, it was hard to tell from that brief encounter. I was so emotional and just kind of like trying to get a sense of if it was still in there, if he was still in there, and yeah, I could tell that he'd been through some stuff. Like he definitely seemed more cautious and troubled than he was when I owned him. And I don't know what he did go through. I mean, particularly during that 9-month gap, it seems likely at best he was a feral cat just struggling on the street, which is traumatic in its own way, I'm sure. But he might have gotten picked up by someone and treated poorly. I don't know, but you could tell that he was kind of a bit more skeptical about life.
Yeah. I recently had to, in mid-December, put down my 16-year-old cat. He was the oldest cat, and then we had 3 other cats, and so we adopted a kitten and a cat who's 2 years old. Petula is her name, and it's interesting because I've always had cats where, with after some bad experiences a few decades ago with trying to insert a cat in the middle of the dominance hierarchy. I've
Oh
always
yeah.
gone with the kittens, such so it's gone up like that. But I thought, well, let me try one more time. And we had this cat. She's 2.5 years old, whatever. And you can tell she's different than the other cats because all four other cats have now started. Their dominant memory is, me as their daddy, my wife as their mommy, whereas it seems to me there's cautiousness. I think the cat Petula was just a cat that was shunted from shelter to shelter to shelter to shelter, kind of thing. Because we got her in a shelter that's a no-kill shelter that takes in other animals from other shelters. So you can kind of, with that kind of background, try to understand why she did this or that. When Watson was with you and young, was he like an affectionate cat? Because this cat, Petula, for example, my wife was crying. Her mother recently died, and so Petula came and was immediately, meowing and rubbing back and forth to try to comfort my wife. Was he a comforter? Was he a protector cat? Or was he just sort of this is my home kind of cat, my territory?
He was definitely not a very. He wasn't expressive with his emotions. He was kind of a classical man. He was really affectionate with me specifically, but it was more. I've definitely noticed a huge difference with cats that come from shelters and like ones that are just raised with the family. In term, at least the ones that I've experienced, because I think that shelter experience and whatever happens before that kind of plants some permanent tension into their psyche. And so Watson was from a shelter, and he was like trusting with me, and eventually he would get cuddly. He was very cuddly with me, but he was just super. He was on high alert all the time for anything different that would come into the world. He had to take his time to get to know it. Whereas this new guy Bob is just like up for whatever. He's like he's never had a problem in his life. He's just pure mellow bliss all the time. Just yeah, it's interesting to see the differences. Raised by the same person, pretty much the same circumstances.
Yeah. Where does it stand now? I mentioned that you, in your last video, I believe you had stated that you were thinking of coming to agreement. Have you come to an agreement with the older one? And I assume she's probably lives by herself, correct? Any spouse?
I think so. I doesn't. I don't know if she has a spouse actually. I think she has grandkids.
Okay.
I didn't get a whole lot of biographical
Okay.
info about her family, but it seemed like she was there by herself. I when I left off from that first meeting, she told me like, feel free to come back and visit him if you want to, and at the time I kind of didn't think I would because it was just it was so intense, and I'm like, I'm not just gonna continue to subject myself to this. But after some time had passed, and actually kind of from feedback from people on the YouTube comments, I was like, actually, it would be kind of nice to still be able to check in on him once in a while and kind of like give some even though I'm not going to take him back, to have some continuity that like that guy still exists. If he has, I don't know what he thinks about who I am to him at this point, but just to kind of reconnect in that way. So I tried once since then, it was only about a month ago that I had that reunion. I've tried to arrange a meetup, but it's tricky because she lives about 2 hours away from me, and over on the other side of the mountain. So it really only makes sense to do it if I'm already making a trip, and she has a schedule. So I haven't managed to make it happen yet.
But has she recognized, just as you recognize he has a new life as Sebastian with her? Does she recognize the import that Watson was to you, and that like if something did happen to her, that it's only right that he go spend his golden years with you?
Yeah, well, we did discuss that, but I'd be surprised if she had any disagreement with that. That's kind of, I'm waiting to actually make another plan to meet up with her to discuss it in person. But it seems pretty reasonable to me that, why should he go anywhere else?
Mm-hmm.
And, they're both kind of at an age where he's probably almost 13 by now.
Mm.
So I don't know how much longer he has left. I know some cats will live a long time, but he's near the end of his life too. And likely he'll go before she does, but I do want to put in my claim on that, at least, even if just he gets too sick and she can't afford to take care of him or something.
So Isaac, let me just give you a little brief 1 or 2 minute story of my own lost cat. I was always one of those people and I've always had indoor cats. I never let them go outside, and I've had close to 20 cats now over almost 50 years. I'm 59, just turned 59. So my first cat came when I was 11. I've had some cats die of FIV, some cats die of feline leukemia. So I did try to adopt some older cats who then had bad reactions, and it brought out things like that. But the one cat, and probably the most traumatic thing in my life, was the loss of this cat named Shia. She was only a year and a half when she ran away or died. I won't get into the details, but I had told my wife the cat was skittish, don't bring her outside, and my wife wanted to just see if she would play in the garden. Boom. And she comes running in and tells me, Chia got out. I said, what? And I went looking for her, and it's that I never got to say goodbye. This cat, for example, that I put to sleep a month and a half ago, his name was Thor. I had to bring him to an emergency hospital because it was Sunday, so my regular vet wasn't open. They had like this death room, and they put him in, they wrapped him. He couldn't walk anymore. He was 16 and a half. They wrapped him in swaddlings, whatnot, and I'm holding, and that song Edelweiss from the Sound of Music, have you heard it? That in his last 10 minutes, that song now is his song. But the thing is, I was able to say to Thor, I love you, you're my boy, and I didn't get that with Chia. And now, that was in '02. So that's 21, 22 years later. So there's, no way she's alive. I remember, and the odd thing is, I remember thinking, the situation that you were in, I just hope that maybe she found a nice little old lady that took care of her, kind of thing. This was when I was living in Minnesota, and I'm sorry.
I understand.
Yeah.
Well, I think losing an animal is actually a lot worse, in my opinion, than them just dying a natural death because of that. Yeah. Because there's no closure. You don't know what happened to them. That's really tough.
Here it is over 2 decades later, and I'm someone who grew up in a Goodfellas neighborhood. I was just arguing with someone online, talking about some of the things I saw as a kid: people being dead, people being raped. I mean, I grew up with. I did not, and I'm not trying to. I wasn't a kid in the streets of Calcutta, poor, but nothing ever hurt me as much as not women that were in my life or what. Nothing ever hurt me the way the loss of she did. Now I've had any number of cats that I adore since. They all have these personalities, but and this is I'm gonna use this to segue into the comments that you've gotten. I had a friend back then when she had run away, and my wife was feeling so guilty. She tried hiring this animal psychic, and I was really angry. I told this woman, do not call my wife again. You're preying upon her. But my friend said something like, well, it's just another cat, why didn't you get it? And I said, you don't understand, this was my little girl, this was my baby. And the funny thing is, a year or two before that, a couple of years before that, I had an article written about me in a local paper at the time, and my friend, when he was interviewed, said he didn't think that I felt, he thought I didn't feel empathy. And yet here he's telling me when I'm a little weepy, like I am now, telling me it's just another cat. And it just amazed me. And he was a good person, but there's something, people who have pets, who are animal lovers, it's a great divide between the non-animal lovers.
Yeah.
They don't get it, it seems.
I'm sure there's studies analyzing that. If there's not, there should be. but I think it's very interesting to see how some people view animals, and how there's kind of this, I guess, for kind of the mainstream population, there's kind of an unspoken understanding that animals are kind of a novelty. It's not like a person, you know. It's not the bond that you have with an animal doesn't really count, and you know, you can be sad that they're gone, but you're not supposed to be deeply affected by it. And if you
Yeah.
are, then you know they think there's something wrong with you or something, which is really interesting to me, because it's, you know, and like I was saying in that video, it almost makes it harder in a different way, because if you lose a person, everyone understands, everyone is empathetic. You're allowed to feel as much as you want and grieve for as long as you need to. But animals are kind of this weird category where you're just kind of expected to get over it,
Yeah.
and because it's like not that big of a deal.
And
But it is
yeah.
for some.
And the person could be a real bastard. I was arguing with some folks just a week or so ago. You know, when I was a kid growing up, you know, you get these generic kind of memorials, and now they have like memoriam.com or something where anyone who dies puts up the, and there are people that did a lot of bad things, and oh, but he was a man of God. I mean, I saw a man who cheated on my cousin when they were married, and left her and his kids, but he turned his life around and whatnot, and you see these kinds of things. But these same people who were willing to take someone who's a real scumbag and clean up their life, if it's a cat or if it's your dog, and even people who have, you know, more exotic pets, I'm sure, you know, what's wrong with you? It's just a this. It's just, we even call them it's and this. We don't, you know, my cat, Petula, I call her she, her. I don't refer to her as an it. You know, I don't refer to my cats as it. But and you know, it's just a curious thing, and so I think it was a very interesting thing to make the video. And was there something when you got the idea to make the initial video and reveal this loss? Was it for other people more than yourself, or both?
Well, I sat on it for a long time before I didn't tell anybody that I even had found Watson for until I made that video. And I knew that for, so it was almost a year before I actually, you know, announced it, which was
Oh, so
weird
there was
for
a
me
year gap
because
from finding out he was alive till you went to see him?
it was trying to remember the timeline now. It took quite a while basically for me to get up the courage to go see him,
Mm.
because there was a lot else going on in my life which I could kind of use as an excuse, and it was, you know, hard. I'd made contact with her and was like, I'm gonna come see him, and I'd had a few attempts where I was passing over, and I was just at work this weekend to meet up, and it wouldn't, for whatever reason. So I was trying, but I was kind of not trying as hard as I would have liked to, because I was kind of afraid of what was going to happen.
Did you think
Like,
that he might give you that look like you abandoned me?
yeah,
Yeah.
I had a lot of different fears. I was
Mm.
afraid, on one hand, what am I going to do if he does react like that? If he's like, Dad, you come back for me, like, how am I going to stick to my promise to not take him?
Yeah.
And then there was also the concern, like, what if, you know, her home is a shithole, and it doesn't seem like he's being well taken care of, and like
Yeah.
I suddenly have my doubts about that decision. It's going to be very difficult to go back on it. So there's all these different ways, but also I was just like the emotional blow that I was preparing for, of like seeing him again and making that connection, and then leaving. I knew that was going to be really hard, so I was just kind of like avoiding it for quite a while. And so yeah, I don't remember exactly how long it was from when I got the call to when I saw him. It was at least a few months.
Mm.
I did make a few attempts, but it wasn't, you know, until pretty recently that I'm like, I need to do this.
Mm.
So I did keep in touch with her that whole time, but yeah, until I actually did it and kind of got past it, that was when before that, I didn't tell anybody that he was back and that he had come back into the world,
Mm.
which is, he was kind of a star, you know, like I had a social media presence in the years that I had him, and you
Mm.
know, everybody just wanted pictures of Watson. It was like everyone becomes a fan of the cat,
Mm.
and so the people were very following that loss along with me when I, you know, posted that I lost him. It was kind of like like we'd lost a celebrity or something.
Mm.
And so yeah, it was weird. But so I felt like I had to share it for that reason, if nothing else, because so many people, like strangers to me, just fans and stuff, were invested in that story of what happened to him years ago. And when I did post the video, I got a lot of people who remembered it from back in those days, and they were like, "Oh, I was so sad for you," and like this is so beautiful to see that it turned out okay in the end. And so I felt like I owed it to the world to tell them what happened.
Mm-hmm. Um, so I know, like when with Chia had medical problems and she beat the odds, and it almost seemed like the life was just going to screw her over in one way or another. Um, uh, so you make the video, you put it online, the first one. What would you say ratio wise, at least with those that you've read? I think that has like several thousand comments. I think the latest one has close to 1,000.
Yeah.
I think in the second video you said it's like maybe 90% positive comments.
Yeah, it's an interesting statistical observation. Like I've seen this happen, but I've had a handful of videos kind of go viral to some extent, and it's the same every time. Where when it starts out, it's all really positive because it's people that are, they're there because they're aligned with you in some way. Like they found whatever you're doing and they've like chosen to follow it. And then the wider the audience becomes, the more negative it becomes because it's being shown to more and more people who didn't want to see this, and it's being pushed in front of their faces by the algorithm or whatever. And so you get more and more antagonistic responses as it goes wider to the broader public. So yeah, I don't know, the ratio may have shifted by now. I think it's still overall mostly positive. Once in a while, I'll briefly skim through. I'll like look at the notifications and just kind of scan to see if there's anything like really personal, important that I need to catch. 9 out of 10 comments are kind of more or less the same thing. It's just sort of people saying I'm crying or whatever, or telling their story of their cat, which is, I did read everything for a long time and I responded to everything for a long time. It was a very cathartic experience. That was the other side of why I wanted to make that video, is just that I felt like I needed to share it and kind of help process it for myself with other people. And that actually was helpful for a while. The responses kind of allowed me to figure out my feelings about it and move past it. But then once it kind of goes beyond the human level and goes into the YouTube algorithm machine, gets churned up and spit out as content, then it starts to get ugly, and I had to shut it off when that happened.
It's amazing to me. The most seemingly inoffensive. I can understand if it's the Ukraine, Russia, Palestine, Gaza stuff. I can understand if it's pro-abortion, anti-abortion. I can understand if it's reparations for slavery and stuff. People have their opinions, even if they're dumb opinions, in my opinion. I can understand, but the loss of something that was important to someone, especially something that's a living being, and then the cruelty. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't. I mean, it's one of those things that intellectually I understand that human beings are scared, fragile creatures. I work in a supermarket. And whenever I'm arguing with someone politically, I go to work, maybe they piss me off, and then I see some little old lady, struggling to get a can of soup off the shelf, and I'll go help her or something, and I'm like, I'm just babbling now myself, but
yeah. If you were a YouTube commenter, you'd look at her and be like, should have worn heels to the store, idiot. Too bad you're too short. That does blow my mind, what you're saying. Like, people will see a poignant situation and still have no problem like smacking you down.
Let me just ask a few more pertinent questions, and then I'll ask maybe if anything, some of the more positive stuff there. I know when Chia ran away, I felt a double guilt. I felt a guilt that I had failed Chia in protecting her, and I also felt a guilt that even though my wife had been the one that had brought her out, that I didn't emphasize enough that she was a skittish cat, that she had she almost died when the dumb doctor gave her Rimadyl, which was a dog medicine, and so she had dodged the bullet a few times in her brief life, and then this happened, and you go through these kinds of odd little things. Did I not emphasize enough to my wife? What did I do wrong? I mean, and people have this even when their children turns out to be, say, an alcoholic and they die young or something like that. Even I mean, obviously, a cat doesn't have the agency that you or I do, but still, you make these kinds of you create these scenarios. Did you have these sort of labyrinthine constructions of how did I fail, Watson? How did I?
Yeah, definitely. And the first one that, I mean, on the surface level, it was just that, the one that in retrospect I don't really think I can blame myself for, was just that, I didn't, like you said, I didn't emphasize enough the precautions that needed to be taken. He was with my grandparents, and it was actually kind of the first time I realized that my grandfather in particular was like not as coherent as I thought he was, because I thought they were, they weren't senile. I thought they were normal people, and found out, just how he got out was basically that my grandpa decided he needed some fresh air, and he cracked a window in the room that Watson was being kept in, and he never imagined that Watson could open it the rest of the way. And he just thought, open a crack and get some air in here, and Watson just pushed it open and walked out. So things like that, where it was actually, he actually was lost twice at my grandparents. I just remembered that as the first time. I can't even remember how it happened the first time. He got out through some mishap that my grandpa did, like he left the door open or something, and I found him again that time. And I, at that point, I was like, really emphasized, you've got to just don't mess with him, leave him in this room, don't open the door, don't open anything. And then he still decided, I think it'll be fine, and did it anyway. So I in retrospect, I just thought, like, man, did I not realize how, irresponsible my grandparents were? I always thought of them as responsible people, but the fact that they let that happen. But I think the bigger one for me, what really, like, the guilt that actually kind of got under my skin, was just the fact that it happened because of my decision to throw my whole life away, basically. Because when I left Seattle, it was like that was a bigger move in a lot of ways than moving out where I am now, because it was like a fundamental shift from my whole urban experience, all my social life, my whole, being part of the civic endeavor of humanity. Like, I was a big believer in, like, cities and all working together toward the common good and everything. And I kind of had this dark turn where I abandoned all of that and thought, you know what, I want to leave this. I want to be out on my own. And my first little step in that direction, and then, as an immediate result, I lost my buddy. And I just couldn't help but think, like, this is all part of my, my stupid little venture here. I should have just stayed put and kept things normal.
Was it a sense that you've forsaken mankind and God is punishing you? I don't know if you're religious or anything.
Not so much literally, but it was more like a feeling of, because, a lot of my friends at the time were like, what are you doing, man? Like, you're going to live out in the middle of nowhere by yourself. Like, you're going to go crazy. You're going to be so lonely. We'll miss you. Like, all the life that I was leaving behind, and, selling my house, and just, like, kind of throwing a lot of what used to be my world away. Mm-hmm. And I have a history of doing these kind of rash moves where I find some new thing I'm excited about, and I just kind of plunge into it head over heels, and oftentimes with unpredictable, chaotic results. So it kind of felt like a big version of that, where I was kind of like telling everybody, you know what, I'm done. I don't care about you anymore. Like, I'm just leaving. And so there was some sadness as part of that. And then to have, an immediate result of that, basically like losing my child in the process of that decision, you can't help but feel like, it was because of that, even though it is technically literally because of that, but people move. You got to move. Everybody moves at some point. So I don't think it was really because of that, but symbolically it felt connected. It's just like, what have I done?
So let me the last few months, my wife and I have hired some people doing some work on the house, fixing up patio in the back. we had a foundation lifted and whatnot. So we had some workmen working outside, but they weren't really coming inside to measure things. But one of them one day knocked on the door and said they were done, wanted to show me things. So I went out the front door, pulled the door, shut it. There was a new door that we just had put in. Because I live, we got like a T-shaped street, and I live at the bottom of the T, so it's almost like a wind tunnel funneling down. And so I went out for 5 minutes or so. They showed me the stuff. I said, "Oh yeah, good. I'll see you tomorrow." And I got back in, and the wind had blown the door because I hadn't locked it. And I was like, "Oh my God, I've got my 5 cats now," and I looked and I can't. And they're all there because they're indoor scaredy cats mostly, but. And so I told my wife, I said, Jess, from now on, you go out there, even if you're going to get the mail, you lock the door behind you, because I've ever in 20 years, this was the only, I've been paranoid since Chia, and yet I might have done something that I could have lost one or more of my other cats if they hadn't been scaredy cats. But so with Bob, your new cat or your current cat, have you been like extra vigilant because you live out there? So he's an outdoor indoor cat too. I mean, do you worry that a rattlesnake's going to bite him or that a bear's going to make a meal of him?
Yeah, they're very different situations. Like with Watson, I kept him indoors for the first year of his life, I think, and I really didn't want him to be outdoors. For all the logical reasons, and there was something about him. He couldn't handle it. He was just miserable, and I'd watch him day after day just stare out the window screaming. He'd claw at the door all day, and he just never got over it. He never got used to it, and I just decided, like, this is a wild man. Like he's not meant to be a house cat, and he just will never be happy this way. So I kind of, like, at that time, took what I felt was an acceptable risk in I was in a relatively safe kind of suburban neighborhood, and just went for that. After having experienced losing him, I don't think I would do that again. I don't know. I would hope I wouldn't get such a wild man cat if I did live in a city again. But looking back on it, I being in an urban environment has a lot more problems. Even suburban, it's a lot riskier. You can, cars and psychos who torture cats, and also, their effects on the ecosystem and all that stuff. And so that's a whole different equation to me. Out here, there are some dangers, but it's relatively safe for as far as being outdoors. There's not many things that can happen to him here. There are some, like coyotes are really the only significant risk. There aren't really bears out here. There aren't a lot of predator birds.
Has Bob not come back on any nights that you've been like, oh my God?
There was one night where fairly recent, after we had moved here, and he was still kind of exploring his territory, and he did disappear for a day, and he found him in the neighbor. I say neighbor is about, I don't know, quarter-mile away, but found him. My neighbor's cat had chased him up the tree, and he was just stuck up there kind of whining. But that was the only time he wandered that far afield. I think ever since then, maybe it was because of that, but I feel more comfortable about it now because he doesn't really go anywhere. He just kind of hangs out around the shed here, and I've never seen any predators within eyesight of the shed. The coyotes are out there, but they kind of keep the distance from the population. So basically, I mean, I don't claim that it's safe, but I feel like for every creature, every human child or animal or whatever, there's a calculus to the decision of safety versus happiness. And obviously, if the only priority was safety, you'd never let any of your family leave the house, right? Yeah. Like you'd lock them up in the basement. So for me, there's kind of a compromise to be made of I do my research, figure out what's going on in the situation here. I have a system, he stays inside at night, only is out during daylight hours, so the predators are less of an issue. I have some these little flashing lights kind of set up around the perimeter that are supposed to look like predator eyes that scare coyotes away, and kind of take as many precautions as I can. And then the rest is just a calculated risk, I guess, which I feel like I have to take because if I locked him up in this 10 by 8 shed, he'd lose his mind.
And then, like you said, I was thinking that maybe because you have Bob and you've got a smaller house, even if you wanted to take Sebastian slash Watson back,
Yeah.
it would be a pissing contest,
Yeah.
literally maybe.
I think Bob would be okay with it, but Watson, he's never lived with a cat before. He's pretty territorial. I mean, when he was outdoor in that neighborhood, he would get in fights with all the other cats because he was just super territorial. I don't think he could handle it, especially as cramped of a space this is. It would just be hell on earth. I mean,
So
so there's that too.
So just a few more questions, and then I'll let you go. As I said, I appreciate you doing this because it's something that's probably how many are there really that many people who've experienced this that have made videos? So I think it's a unique thing. Are you at a state of closure with what happened, or if not, do you see the end of the tunnel coming?
Well, it's a weird process because I felt like I was when I left him there. I kind of like had my moment with him. Kind of, I left. I cried for a while, and then I felt like, okay, I've made the decision. I've done the groundwork and made sure that it seems like he's in a good place and was okay with it. And then this damn video is kind of makes it hard to let it go because literally every day 100 people send me their different opinions about what I should have done.
Yeah.
And it's just popping up in my list all day. That's why I try to ignore it
Yeah.
because it's just like constant picking at the scab.
Mm.
But I still feel like the decision is made. I don't think, unless I discovered some horrible new truth about their family or something, I'm not going back on it.
Yeah.
It's just it is what it is, basically.
So, I guess the final question I would ask then is I'm an agnostic and atheist. I have a very materialist view of the cosmos. I don't think things happen for reasons. I don't think there's a God's plan. You just things happen. You have to deal with it. This is probably my growing up. It's my parents were not particularly religious. What is your, if you want to share it, your sort of religious view, and do you feel that there was some kind of lesson, did the cosmos, did God, do you think this happened for a reason, the Watson thing, that, maybe out there's some people that are going through a similar thing, and like with me, it connected with them, and this helped, was there some plan that you think that you are helping others? I mean, it's a convoluted kind of logic, which was why I'm not particularly religious. But if you are, can you explain if you feel that?
Yeah, I'm not religious either. I did grow up in that environment, kind of that background, but I left it behind in pretty young age. And these days, I guess I'd probably consider myself agnostic as well. But I don't think that I'm not opposed to the idea that there is some kind of machination going on through some sort of forces, but I don't know anything about it. I don't have any particular framework to view that through. So to me, it is, I guess, I don't think that this situation was like written for me by some entity. I don't think it was scripted to happen this way. But I guess if there's a lesson that I've taken from it, when this did happen, 6 years ago, when I lost him, tons of people were telling me like, he might turn up, and I was like, no, he's not. Like, that's not going to happen. Oh well, it happens. Just keep the faith or whatever. And I never imagined that it would. And when it did, it there's kind of a strange circularity to it that is intriguing to me, and I have noticed a recurring theme with a lot of things when I, looking back over the sum total, the context of my life, how many times bad things will happen, and then somehow or another, through convoluted chain of events, they kind of come back around in some positive way, some way that they sort of work themselves out, not necessarily by achieving the result that I wish it had happened at the time, but they end up supporting the overall like forward movement of my life. And it's just interesting for me to think about because I tend to, I maybe you could call me a overall negative person. I tend to see the bad side of things first, and it's only in retrospect later, looking back, I'm like, you know what, that actually kind of got me to some other plateau that I wanted to get onto, and so I don't know. The more times that happens, the more I think about trying to hold on to that idea, to think like, well, it's just part of the journey, like they're steps, and you never know what's going to take you.
Yeah, it's one of those things with people. My wife is much more uh, overtly sensitive to things than I am. Things that crush her, they wash off my back, and then people will say, "Well, don't you have any feelings? Don't you have any emotion?" I said, "Yeah, but I'm not gonna." It's when I see people, let's say, if they were molested when they were a child or something, and it's 60 years later, and they're still haven't been able to get out of it. I mean, I understand it, but it's like, if you're letting something 6 decades in the past ruin your life now, you have to own some of that yourself. And people are, oh, you just don't understand. So let me ask you, then finally, I guess, is in the future here, as you go on, because you're in your early 40s, right? Uh, where do you see your life? I think in may have been in the second video or on your website. I saw you is it music or photography? You're exploring other art. Do you see? Will you always be a writer, or do you see yourself trying to, be a filmmaker or whatnot? Where do you think your own personal evolution and also with any future cats or animals you may own?
Well, I mean, as far as the career stuff, that's kind of the big question in my life right now, is figuring out, where is it all heading? Because I think that writing is still kind of the core of everything that I do, but I have been branching out a lot lately and kind of using writing in different mediums. Like this whole YouTube thing is a brand new venture to me. I just started it 4 months ago, and I'm like learning the video editing stuff, and kind of really finding a lot of satisfaction in that new medium that I never really dabbled much in before. I don't know. I doubt that will lead to like an actual filmmaking career, because that's just so high investment and so involving. But I would like to explore more of kind of just the video side of things. I don't know if it's just YouTube itself, or if that leads into other formats. I've started. I'm currently working as a story writer for a video game company, writing the story for their new game. So I've already kind of been branching out. Novels is still what I would like to be doing, because it's writing prose, writing fiction is just the freest form of art that I've found. Has the least interference from outside forces, and you can just kind of do exactly what's in my mind. And I miss that. It's been a long time since I've got to indulge in it, because I keep getting drawn off.
And I've said to people, unless we get telepathic powers, that we evolve with telepathy, writing is the closest that you can get to implanting something in someone's mind. I mean, it's literally squiggles on a medium.
Yeah, that was pretty much the exact reasoning that I came up with, because I used to shuffle my time between writing and music and visual art, and I'll go really hard on one thing for a while and make a bunch of it, have a performance of some kind, and then I would drop it and switch to another thing. Eventually had to realize I had to kind of pick one and prioritize it, and that was pretty much my thought. It's like, well, which one of these is the purest transmission of what I want to communicate? And I'm just like, all these other ones have these vehicles you have to travel through to get it through. Even if it's just yourself, you still have a medium. And then filmmaking has tons of other people involved, and just all the interference. And I love the purity of writing fiction, because it really is just direct transmission of thought. So that's still what I want to build my life around. But if I get a side quest once in a while, a little journey like this YouTube stuff has been surprisingly enjoyable for me, even though it's not even really art in the sense of creating new stories. It's just sort of like, I don't know, journalism or new, just telling my own story. So it's not creating anything, but it's creating a way of telling it, I guess.
Well, I want to thank you for talking about it, because your website, or rather your YouTube channel, I had a popular website that in the 20 some years ago till about almost a decade ago was one of the, was, as far as I know, the most popular arts website out there. But when I try to do the YouTube videos, it's a totally different medium, and you know, I get, for every view or read that I would get on my old website, I get, or for every view I get here, I get maybe, you know, 150,000 times more there, and it just seems a lot of YouTubers that get some viral videos or get some whatever, they don't want to like reach out or interact with the people. So I thank you for doing that. And even though I don't know you, I just want to give you a piece of advice, since I'm almost 20 years older than you. And I only know you from this conversation and the videos that I saw. I haven't read any of your zombie books, and you know, I don't know the music or the photos or whatnot you've done. But you seem like a good, decent person. So what I would tell you, in your personal life or your artistic life, one thing to keep it real is be bold. If you're going to fail at something, fail by being active. Don't let life play you. I'm a firm believer in free will. I argue with this all the time. It's the closest thing we have to a superpower. You have the ability to bring meaning to your existence. This is something that Watson or my cats or Bob don't have. They're wonderful creatures. They can love, they can feel joy, they can feel pain, but they don't have the degree of agency that we have. And whether it's in your personal life, your love life, whether it's in your professional life, whether it's in your creative life, don't be afraid. It took me many years growing up to not be afraid, and this will turn people off. If you have real self-confidence, that turns people off because they can't manipulate you. They can't tell you about what to do. So that would be my advice across the board, because you know, I'd like to see you succeed personally and whatnot. So and again, thank you for spending time with me.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'll take it to heart.